Mr. Speaker, I heard what? Oh, wait for it. Yeah. What Ben Wallace said was that spending had fallen under all governments. 3%, the last time, Mr. Speaker, the last time spending was at 3% was under a Conservative government. And yes, while we welcome the increase, something that we supported, can I remind the House that this is a man who sat in the shadow cabinet and tried to make Prime Minister a man who said we shouldn't even be in NATO at all. So I don't need to take any lectures from him. The world is changing. We need to spend more on defence. He did not answer the question about when we would get to 3%, yet he knows up until 2031 how much he's going to be spending on welfare. He doesn't know. That's in the Red Book. The Red Book has no money allocated for defence. We need to move from ambition to commitment. And Mr. Speaker, this is important because this isn't just about money. If the Prime Minister is deploying troops to Ukraine, those troops need to know that we have their backs. Yeah. Last week, 7 former SAS commanders, warned that Labour's Northern Ireland Troubles Bill will wreck our special forces. Not me, that's the SAS. In November, 9 retired 4-star generals warned that his bill was a direct threat to national security. And even his own Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner has said our veterans are being treated worse than terrorists. So, Mr. Speaker, is it not madness to be putting veterans in the dock for serving their country at the same time he is deploying today's soldiers into Ukraine?
Imagine, if you will, being a British soldier standing in a muddy trench in Ukraine, looking over your shoulder, not for the enemy, but for a summons from a human rights lawyer back in London. It sounds like the plot of a particularly bleak political thriller, but according to BADENOCH, it is the future Sir Keir Starmer is building for our armed forces. We are only 1 week into the political year of 2026, and the honeymoon for this Labour government hasn't just ended. It has been filed for divorce, and the locks have been changed. In a Prime Minister's questions that can only be described as a verbal cage match, the Conservative leader didn't just grill the Prime Minister, she systematically dismantled his moral authority on national defence. While Starmer is busy signing declarations in Paris to put British boots on the ground in Kyiv, BADENOCH has pointed out the staggering madness of doing so while simultaneously putting our veterans in the dock for serving their country decades ago. It was a slapdown so clinical it left the government benches in a stunned, stony silence, and it has set the stage for a year of absolute ideological warfare. Quick favour, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers have not yet. It is free, takes a second, and means the world to us at the British Report. Thanks if you did. Now, back to the show. Let us get straight into the heart of the conflict because the timing of this could not be more sensitive. Just yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer was in Paris, standing shoulder to shoulder with Emmanuel Macron and Volodymyr Zelensky, signing a declaration of intent to deploy British peacekeeping forces to Ukraine once a ceasefire is reached. It is a massive, historic commitment. But while the ink was still drying on that treaty, BADENOCH was waiting for him in the House of Commons with a very different kind of paperwork. She essentially asked the question every service member in the country is currently whispering: how can you ask us to go and defend democracy abroad when you are busy dismantling the legal protections of those who defended it at home? The bone of contention is Labour's new Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. For those who need a refresher, the previous Conservative government passed a Legacy Act that offered a form of conditional immunity to veterans and others, provided they cooperated with a truth recovery process. It was designed to end the lawfare that has seen 80-year-old men dragged through the courts for split-second decisions made in the heat of a terrorist campaign 50 years ago. But Labour, in their infinite metropolitan wisdom, is repealing that protection. They call it restoring justice, but BADENOCH calls it disgraceful. She stood at the dispatch box and looked Starmer dead in the eye, telling him that British soldiers need to know that their politicians have their backs. It is a simple concept, really. If you want people to run towards the sound of gunfire in 2026, you probably shouldn't be prosecuting the people who did it in 1976. But it wasn't just Badenoch's opinion. She brought receipts from the very people Starmer is supposedly leading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the Prime Minister's efforts to advance peace in Ukraine and his joint statement on Greenland. The last few days have seen significant international events. The US operation in Venezuela, threats towards Greenland, and an agreement to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. So it is frankly astonishing that the Prime Minister is not making a full statement to Parliament today. No Prime Minister, Labour or Conservative, has failed to make a statement to the House in person after committing to the deployment of British troops. His comments about making a statement in due course, quite frankly, are not good enough. It shows a fundamental lack of respect for all of us here and the people we represent. Mr. Speaker, the US is Britain's closest military ally. However, we are clear that the sovereignty of Greenland is sacrosanct. So can the Prime Minister tell us what influence is he bringing to bear with the US administration to ensure that is respected?
When Kemi Badenoch wants to make a point, she doesn't just use rhetoric, she uses the weight of the entire military establishment. She pointed out that just last week, 7 former SAS commanders, the literal tip of the spear, issued a chilling warning. They said that Labour's new bill will wreck our special forces. Let that sink in for a moment. We are talking about the most elite, most secretive and most vital part of our national security apparatus, telling the Prime Minister that his policy is a suicide mission for morale. And they aren't alone. In November, 9 retired 4-star generals, men who have led armies into battle, warned that this bill is a direct threat to national security. The analogy is simple. It is like asking a fireman to run into a burning building while simultaneously telling him that if he breaks a window to save a child, he will be sued for property damage 30 years later. Who would take that job? Badenoch highlighted that even the government's own Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner has said our veterans are being treated worse than terrorists. While former IRA members received letters of comfort and escaped through the back door of the peace process, the men who held the line against them are being treated as common criminals. Is it not madness, Badenoch asked, to be putting veterans in the dock at the same time you are deploying today's soldiers into Ukraine? It was a question that hung in the air like a bad smell, and Starmer's attempt to answer it was, quite frankly, a masterclass in deflection. Starmer's response was classic prosecutor Keir, but it felt more like he was defending a weak brief than leading a country. The Prime Minister's counterattack was to claim that the Conservative plans would have granted immunity to terrorists. He tried to flip the script, accusing the Tories of being the ones who let IRA members off the hook. Their flawed act was struck down by the courts, he shouted over the roar of the Labour benches, leaving our veterans with no legal protection whatsoever. He promised a fair and transparent process with a package of rights and protections. But here is the rub. Veterans don't want a package of rights to be investigated. They want the investigations to stop. They want the torture by the state, as some have called it, to end. Starmer's insistence that there is no equivalence between the armed forces and terrorist groups sounds good on paper, but the reality of the new bill tells a different story. By removing the immunity clause, the government is essentially reopening the door for compelling reasons to prosecute. And who decides what is compelling? Usually, it is a legal system that has become increasingly prone to retrospective judgment. Badenoch wasn't having any of it. She fired back with a line that will likely be on every Tory campaign leaflet for the next 6 months. On this side of the House, we will defend those who defended us. It was a simple, punchy and devastatingly effective way to frame the debate as a choice between national honour and bureaucratic legalism. While the drama in the Commons was reaching a boiling point, the real elephant in the room was miles away in a radio studio.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the Prime Minister either does not have the detail or does not want to give us the detail. Yes. But this is important. He should be calling an urgent meeting of NATO leaders. He should have spoken to President Trump by now. This is important because if any such peace deal is breached, we would be in direct conflict with Russia. If the Prime Minister is committing troops, he must give more detail on how he intends to ensure our armed forces are fully resourced.
While Starmer and Badenoch were trading blows over the dispatch box, Nigel Farage was busy delivering his own State of the Union from the comfort of a Times radio studio. The Reform UK leader has effectively gone on strike from PMQs, claiming he is tired of being abused by a failing Prime Minister without any right of reply. He called Starmer Beijing obsessed and pointed out that the Prime Minister has serious questions to answer about his administration's links to the Chinese Communist Party. It is a fascinating dynamic. We have the official opposition in the chamber and the unofficial opposition on the airwaves, and both are successfully painting the Prime Minister as a man who is fundamentally out of his depth. Farage's commentary added another layer of suspense to the day. He noted that the public deserves a more rigorous PMQs and argued that the government is abusing the session by distributing questions in a way that silences dissent. He even threw a curveball into the defence debate, suggesting that he would look at the ballooning welfare bill to ramp up funding for our military. It is a bold populist stance that contrasts sharply with Starmer's peanuts approach to defence spending, which has already been mocked by the likes of Andrew Neil. The message from the right is clear. We are living in a dangerous world, and the current government is more interested in prosecuting our past than protecting our future. The confrontation over Ukraine and Northern Ireland is more than just a political spat. It is a battle for the soul of the British military. The most sensational part of this clash is the revelation that Starmer has only managed to speak to Donald Trump's advisors over the last few days, despite the world being on the brink of several major crises. Whether it is the US operation in Venezuela or the bizarre threats towards Greenland, the international order is shifting under our feet. Kemi Badenoch was quick to point out that today was the earliest opportunity for Starmer to make a full statement on Ukraine, yet he chose to hide behind a few minutes of PMQs instead. She accused him of being scared to take questions, and when the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, stepped in to agree that an early statement was necessary, the Prime Minister's strong leader mask slipped even further. What we saw today was a Prime Minister who wants the glory of international treaties without the grit of domestic accountability. He wants to send troops to Kyiv but won't protect the veterans of Belfast. He wants to talk about security guarantees for Ukraine while our own special forces are warning of a morale collapse. It is a contradiction that cannot hold. As Badenoch rightly said, it is disgraceful to treat veterans this way. The British report will be tracking this Northern Ireland bill every step of the way, because if the SAS is threatening legal action against their own government, we aren't just looking at a political crisis, we are looking at a national emergency. Thank you for watching.